I have a message for all 9/11 truthers. There is an important lesson that you can learn from creationists. But before I get ahead of myself, let me set the background. In the God Conspiracy, I sought to draw a comparison between the psychology of conspiracy theorists and that of creationists. As a result of the responses to that video, my two subsequent videos concentrated more on the 9/11 conspiracy theory. In those two videos, I showed that some of the major claims that truthers rely on are inaccurate. The claims that I have made are these. Firstly, towers 1 and 2 did not fall in 9 seconds, or at freefall speed. Secondly, the observed collapse rates of the towers does not offer any support for the idea of controlled demolition. Thirdly, World Trade Center 7 suffered damage as a result of the collapse of Tower 1. Fourthly, World Trade Center 7 suffered further damage as a result of extensive fires, rather than the few isolated fires claimed by the truthers. And fifthly, Building 7 did not collapse at freefall rate. At the conclusion of my last video, I asked a number of questions. Despite there being a huge number of comments posted on the video, and yes, I have read all of them, not one person addressed those points. And such video responses as there were failed to address them either. And I think I know why that is. You can't. You see, as soon as you start relying on facts and evidence, your arguments will be torn apart. And this is where you can learn from creationists. Now don't feel too bad about this, they've had 2,000 more years experience than you have. But in short, my message is this. Stop trying to rely on facts and stick to innuendo, statements of faith, and appeals to ignorance. Let me expand on the argument. Here are some experts avoiding facts and evidence and talking crap.
Okay, question for Dr. Hoeven. What is your strongest piece of evidence for creation?
I think the evidence for creation would be the absolute impossibility of the contrary.
You've got adaptation within a species, but you've never seen any animal produce anything other than to something else, but you've never seen it happen. No one's ever seen it happen. And that is called macroevolution. No one's ever seen it demonstrated. Science has never found a genuine transitional form that is one kind of animal crossing over into another kind, either living or in the fossil record.
We're all looking at the exact same facts, we're just coming to different conclusions.
The invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made.
Everything is just so incredibly complex, there had to be a creator.
Never, under any circumstances, should you try to rely on evidence. Because as soon as you do, you can be debunked. I'm going to show you some of the problems that you will face if you do try to rely on evidence. Meet Dylan 2, a 9/11 truther. Dylan 2 is going to try and answer some questions. Hi Dylan.
Excuse me, allow me to readjust my antennae. Oh no, my aluminum foil. I have to protect my brain against the pulsars.
At this point in the interview, the satellite connection unexpectedly failed. Dylan 2 was later to rely on this as evidence of a conspiracy, although he was uncertain as to what conspiracy. In any event, we pick it up a few moments later. Oh my god. Dylan 2, how long did it take for the Twin Towers to collapse?
9/11 was an inside job.
Yes, but how long did it take for them to collapse?
9 seconds.
Okay, but have you seen the footage that clearly shows that they don't fall in that time?
Well, they fell at free fall speed.
But 9 seconds is free fall speed.
Nearly free fall speed. Nearly.
Well, what is nearly free fall speed?
9/11 was an inside job.
Oh god, let's move on. Okay, so what is your best piece of evidence to support your theory?
9/11 was an inside job.
Yes, I think we've got that message. But what is your...
World Trade Center 7.
What about it?
No steel structure has ever collapsed through fire.
Well, that's simply not true, is it?
Operation Northwood, Bay of Pigs, Pearl Harbor.
What? Can you explain?
9/11 was an inside job.
Oh, God. So what about the Pentagon?
The hole's too small. I said, the hole's too small. The hole is too small.
What on earth are you talking about? How big was the hole?
17 feet, diametrically speaking.
And are you sure about that?
Look, I don't want your mercury-laden, cancer-laden photograph.
Yeah, enough. Thanks for your help, Dillantine 2.
9/11?
Shut up! Thank God for that. Now let's meet William Pants Craig, a professional bullshitter and a smug twat. We'll try the same questions on him. William Pants Craig, how long did the Twin Towers take to collapse?
Well, that is a very interesting question, young man. How insightful of you to have thought of it. I'm glad you asked me, though, and I relish the opportunity to answer.
So you're going to answer it?
Yes, well, as I said, you raise an interesting question. I think we must begin by asking ourselves, what is time? In a purely metaphysical sense, all one can say is that the time taken was the time between the beginning of the collapse and the end of the collapse. But unless you can divine exactly what reality is, then you are only left with the conclusion that the time involved was consistent with a controlled demolition.
Oh, God. Right. What is the best piece of evidence for 9/11 being a conspiracy?
Once again, a very thought-provoking question. I'm glad to see that you're thinking clearly and concisely about this. Many people have asked that same question in a less meaningful way so as to not so much elicit a response, but rather a circumlocation around the actual issue itself, and thereby not arrive at a meaningful conclusion, but rather dipping one's toe, so to speak, in the turbulent waters, if I'm not mixing too many metaphors. Oh, that is exceedingly simple, young man. But I think we have to begin by understanding what the word evidence actually means. What is evidence? I might see the color blue, but how do I know that when you look at that very same color, you don't see the color red? I think the only thing we can be certain of, though, is that certainty is not certain, and therefore any conclusion we arrive to must inevitably lead to the premise that 9/11 was an inside job.
But even the experts sometimes mess up. Finally, William Pants Craig, what happened at the Pentagon?
Well, the Pentagon is very strong evidence that 9/11 was a conspiracy.
Why?
Well, you simply have to understand that the Pentagon was built in 1943. Note that the figures 9 and 1 appear, but so do 4 and 3. Now, if we subtract 3 from 4, we are left with 1, and that makes 1943 equate to 9/11, or 9/11.
Is that it?
Further, if you take the number 9, which is the significant number, as everyone knows, and I doubt anyone would challenge, and you take away 1 from 9, then you are left with 8. Then if you take away 4 from 9, you are also left with 5, so you have 5 and 8, 58. And that is the exact number of years since the Pentagon was built until 2001. Mere coincidence?
After another 15 minutes or so of this nonsense, he concluded with this.
Also, The flight numbers of the planes involved, or not involved, as everyone knows, they were merely projected images of planes that were substituted for the real ones, which actually landed at Cleveland Hopkins Airport, where the passengers were whisked away to go to Area 51, where they would be turned into fuel for the next fake mission to the moon to join JFK in a house made of cheese.
At which point I'd just had enough. But on a more serious note, to all 9/11 truthers who may be watching, I offer to debunk any claim you make, provided it complies with the provisions in the description. So, give it your best shot. Thank you for watching.
Fuck. I think you have to start by saying... I sound like potholer. We must ask ourselves...
It's time to wake up. Ron Paul 2012.
Yes, nailed it.
17 feet.